Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We are going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Who Am I? The concerto is dedicated to Yuri Bashmet, a viola soloist performing in the video, so no sheet music this time. P.S. It is exactly 30 minutes long. Starting at 52 seconds in and going to 30 minutes and 52 seconds. I don't think you're going to get much more perfect than that. For those who don't know, song requests have a 30-minute limit on them exact, um, unless you want to make a double length request, in which case you can go up to 60 minutes. But the thing is that for that first tier, can't be any longer than 30, and I think this is the only song to hit it right at that 30-minute mark. So we have Alfred Schnittke Viola Concerto with Yuri Bashmet on viola. Let's dive into this, see what's going on. As usual with these, all right, here we go. As usual with classical music, lots of dynamics. So some of these parts may be incredibly quiet. If you want to watch it with your own control over the volume and without worrying about me talking over it, there's a link in the description. Right off the bat, we have a lot of dissonant tones. Oh man, we're taking a dissonance and turning it into tension here. Huge antagonistic vibes to kick this off. Has a really clean bit of stabilization of the harmony for a brief moment before leaning into that very tense note again. Any relief is quickly met and immediately relinquished. Oh man. was that? Tell I listened to more classical and watched more jazz because I saw those cellos there, and I was like, oh, they're bowing an upright bass. That's interesting. Bounce in the background. Extended section of very clear melody back into dissonant atmosphere texture work. It's kind of jarring, but I'm kind of hooked on this. Interesting conducting method. And it works. I get what he's conveying, it's unique to him, I think. Which most conducting styles are. Every conductor has their own thing going on. I love the dual movement in all of this. Descending and ascending lines that just don't seem to have an end. This is a fun part. You saw him moving that slide. It's to keep specific notes in tune. Because I'm pretty sure that's a tuba of some sort, so it's valve based. Oh, very, like squirmy. Into a waltz? I mean, a twisted waltz, sure, but what in the world's going on? Slide sounds so good on non-fretted instruments. The call and response is kind of cheeky. Bringing us, it's not even an abrupt shift, but moving away from the very staccato, rough, bouncy stuff to this legato, fluid playing. We've also changed harmonically too. Everything in here is very consonant and beautiful. A little bit of tension for spice at times, but definitely not looking at anything as antagonistic or dissonant as we had seen in previous sections. Well, the piano almost dreamlike with those rising and falling lines. I love how the piano sort of instigates something, like informing that there's something a little off at the periphery of the song. And there's an alarm clock. Those half-step dyads on the piano. Yeah, whatever this is, it's an illusion, it's temporary. The danger of the first section is going to be coming back real soon. I didn't think it was gonna be that soon, but here we go. There's wild jumps too. Even the melody itself feels a bit disconnected from itself. Oh, that slow bend. Chord getting more and more tense. The utter pain of segments like this. Sorrow dripped in despair. can't for the life of me think of what instrument that is. I mean, it's double reeded, it looks like. But on a clarinet, is that a piccolo clarinet? I don't know. Someone let me know in the comments. And there we go, the opposing movement again. That's all over the place on this. Whenever I talked about in the past of vertical bells, that's what I'm talking about. These long metal tubes you hit with a mallet. I'd really like to know what type of scales we're using in here, but also the key of it all. I'd wager to say on the whole we're probably chromatic, especially in the more tense parts, where it seems that we're using all 12 tones, but we might also be doing microtonal stuff, especially with the viola being fretless. Although I'd say that that's more of an occasional thing. Although there are some octave dyads that I've heard from the viola that feel off, like one's just a hair bit flatter than the other. And see, moments like this feel more constrained than 30 seconds ago, where it felt like the viola was sort of outside of a box, just kind of doing whatever felt right. Those tonal slides are killing me. Hitting a half step under the intended note and then slowly bending or sliding into the target. They sound great, but it's like nails on a chalkboard sometimes, which I think is the intended feeling for it. I think a lot of this is supposed to feel unsettling. Dang, that triple piano is quiet. I love when that tension resolves so effortlessly, begins to work towards something a bit more consonant in harmony. We always come back to something like this, though, don't we? Yeah. We're bringing back some of this ominous energy from the start, but I really think it's going to pick up. I think it's pointing towards something a bit more relaxed, might be the right word. Positives. I don't think we're going to get a happy ending, but just some resolution, maybe? Or maybe not. Just the drone under it all. Alrighty. That was wild. Also, quite a bit outside of my wheelhouse. Uh, Definitely sits a bit more, I think, on the experimental side of classical, although it does keep its foot within more traditional sounds as well, and I think that's what kept me along for the ride. It definitely entertains the idea of dissonant harmony quite a bit throughout this track, and it has absolutely no problem playing around with tense sounds in general. In fact, the idea of opposition, of antagonism, is ever present in this track, and it makes the song feel like an entity all upon its own that the soloist is trying to escape but can't. I find that to be an evocative idea, though it doesn't paints a very strong picture for me. It's more of an idea. There's definitely been classical tracks in the past, and I've had an entire film play out for the runtime of it. But this one, it's more of a concept that I think everything ties into in a way that I don't constantly find myself reevaluating what the song is doing. More so, I just kind of feel this building of intensity and animosity on this base foundation, as this core concept of what the song's trying to do. And so from that perspective, I don't know that I'm the best person to dive into this on an analytical area, but there are plenty of things that I want to touch on to showcase, even if it isn't necessarily about what the song overarching is doing, or even more specifically what the soloist is doing. There's some cool things, and I really love how the camera work, of course, focused on the soloist quite a bit. We got wide shots of the entire orchestra, but we also got close-up shots of some of the other instruments, even less important parts, droning ideas or very foundational static, or not static, but slow moving lines from an instrument, and they'll still showcase what they're doing. And I thought that was awesome. I mean, I got to see a tuba player, I believe, adjusting slides as they play, which is just not something you see too often. Um, and it's little things like that that I think the cameraman or the director of this performance, of the video part of the performance, they uh they had a keen eye for and understood some of the underlying parts of how an artwork like this gets created. And it's not just the stuff that's flashy, that's in the front of everything, the soloist, but it's also the little parts that create the nuances in the foundation. Without them, the song would not be what it is. So yeah, let's dive into some of that. First of all, I just want to bring up the concept of positive and negative composition intermingling. I thought this was fantastic. There are very few sections of this where I was 100% feeling it as a purely positive or negative experience. I think this is showcased most prominently in the lead viola line, where it would dip between these more beautiful, almost whimsical, very light-hearted runs, followed by these elongated, tense drones, just really holding out these very tense dyads, creating lots of dissonant harmony, and then shifting back into a very fluttery, quick-moving, beautiful passage before dipping back into that tension again. This back and forth light versus darkness is ever present in this track, whether it is something a bit more obvious like that, the ping-ponging back and forth between that, or the relationship between the band, the orchestra, and the soloist, where maybe one would have a bit more of a positive flair to it, a little bit more optimistic, and the other represents a type of negativity. um, and we can see this in the second movement of this, where the violist, that would be the word. That's the word I don't think I've ever used before. I had to think about it. What is someone who plays the viola? Instinctively, I wanted to go violinist because that just rolls off the tongue, and that's a word that gets thrown around a lot because, at least in my experience, the violin is a much more popular instrument, especially for a lead solo part. But violist, I'm pretty sure that's accurate. If anyone knows, again, let me know in the comments what you call somebody who plays the viola. But in that second movement, our solo violist, why it feels so weird to say, is playing very flowery, engaging, moving ideas. Lots of really quick shifts between two notes, almost trilling a sound before landing on something with very heavy consonant um, stability, harmonic stability, giving us this release of the tension that we had when we were bouncing back and forth between the two notes prior. And it's all of this very light and beautiful movement. But underneath it, the orchestra was kind of building something a bit darker. We didn't have a lot of bright treble stuff. The viola was sort of up there on its own. Everything on the bottom, though, low bassy stuff, the cello, the tuba, probably the trombones, maybe some clarinet in there as well, just kind of filling out this low rumble underneath. And it feels eerie. It feels unknown and unexpected. Why is the viola so happy and loose and free when what boils beneath it is so filled with anger, with darkness? Of course, I pointed this out during the reaction, but this was about the time, or this was the section that ended with the piano introducing a lot of tension, and then eventually that alarm clock sound with that auxiliary percussion instrument. And I had mentioned that all of this felt like it was going to turn back into tension again, and it certainly does with increasing regularity until it builds into the next part, which I think was the end of that movement. And then it dipped down and we reached silence, then we moved into the final movement. But yeah, I mean, that is a very clear example of an antagonistic relationship between the soloist and the orchestra. So between that type of writing and the former writing, where we sort of intermingled the light and dark aspects within the single melody, I feel like that's just a really big part of this entire idea here. And I don't really know what it means. This is one of those cases where I think multiple listens are really going to help. And for me, especially, I mean, some people might listen to this and just immediately get it, but certainly things a bit more on the esoteric side of writing that's more representational rather than melodic. It's going to take me a couple of times to get. Plus, when you look at how disjointed this song can be at times, as far as moving between ideas, it's something that I've historically had problems with picking up on a first time listen, especially doing it on this channel. But I think I get that core idea. I'm just not sure what it represents yet. But that antagonistic push and pull, the tug of war between lighter, more carefree sounds and this dark, antagonistic anxiety. It exists everywhere on this track. And to me, it's the core element of it. I'm curious to hear what other people might interpret this song as, but I also am, as usual, curious about the authorial intent. What did Schnittke have in mind when writing this? Um, you know, a couple days, I guess a week ago, I don't know, man. Time's weird. It was Friday the 10th, I think. Um, we checked out a Godspeed You Black Emperor album, and they've been a band that's bounced off of me in the past. I've enjoyed what they do from an artistic standpoint, but I haven't really connected with their music. But knowing their intentions behind the album that we checked out on that Friday or Saturday, oh, it was a Saturday. So it's probably the 11th then. But knowing their intentions and what they had in mind while they were writing it allowed me to engage with it in a way that I don't know I would have without. And so that might be something I need here too, is just to know what kind of frame of mind Schnittke is in, what he's trying to represent here. Maybe not the entire story, but the core themes. What is the heart of this viola concerto? And that would help me connect some of these dots a lot easier. It's just simply knowing where the dots are instead of, trying to connect these dots in a room with no light. Not my best metaphor, but I hope it makes sense. Um, Another part of this that stands out to me a lot is opposing movement. We have opposition of harmony throughout here, but we also have opposition of movement. The song likes to speed up and slow down, and speed up and slow down. I don't think the tempo is actually changing. A lot of this happens particularly when we have the solo violin or violist. So I'm pretty sure we're just in free time hey, viola player, play what you feel, right? Get through this passage however feels right for you, and then I'll start conducting again when we have the whole orchestra. And that's not completely unheard of. I mean, it probably happens more often than you think in the world of classical music, especially when you have a soloist. So that might be what's happening there, but it is this push and pull that whether it is Schnittke's design or if it's what Bashmet decided to put in as an interpretation of the work, it is, in this performance at least, a strong component of how this song is presented to me. Is having this constant push and pull. But we also have so many sections in here where we're going to start from one tempo and gradually slide into another, whether we're doing a retardando and just drastically dropping the tempo smoothly over time, or an accelerando, the opposite, starting from a slower one and gradually moving into a higher tempo. There is this concept of opposition here. I think that's the word that's going to be, the word of the day for this performance. The song just never really wants to stay in one place as far as tempo is concerned. It's constantly moving. But even when we look at pitch, there's so many places where I pointed out parallel movement where the orchestra is going to start from a high note and the viola is going to start from a low note, and they're going to move pitches in opposing directions. One's going to rise, one's going to fall. And to me, that feels very swirly. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. Um, it's like, I don't know how to represent that in a clean metaphor. It's like being torn in two different directions, but cyclical. So instead of just being like ripped apart, you're sort of like crossed over at a point and then meet back in the middle at a different point. That probably doesn't make any sense either. I don't know. It's like being in two tornadoes spinning in different directions. That's terrible. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that one. It constantly feels impossible, awkward, disorienting, I think is a good word for it. And I think particularly it isn't necessarily the opposing movement, which we've heard in other tracks before. I think Opeth likes to use that if we're going for a metal parallel, but oh, you know what? I think it's Dream Theater who actually likes to use it, not Opeth. It is one of the prog metal groups though. Um, but it's the harmonic elements in here too. It's the tension, it's the awkward key and scale and tones. Um, it's all of that worked into it. It's already a disorienting song, and then we also have this split movement idea. And when you bring all that together, it's even more disorienting. At least for me, that was my experience listening to it. And again, I think that's the intention behind it. A lot of this song is not preferable for me to listen to. There is a lot of elements of music in here that just are not my favorite sounds. There's a lot of tension, there's a lot of antagonism, there's a lot of parts not working together very well. Taking up, two instruments taking up the same space rather than sort of being displaced by time or whatever. Tone, pitch. There's lots of ways to separate instruments outside of the production side that you typically hear with, mainstream music. Your metals, pops, hip hops, all that stuff. Um, where you can place instruments in different parts of the mix. But even when you have a purely acoustic thing like this, the instruments are placed in certain places on the stage for sort of production reasons, to place them in specific parts of the room so that specific sounds come from your left or your right. Um, and so there's lots of ways to make sure that when you write three different ideas that are going off at the same time, that you can still create space between them, whether it's volume or pitch or placement or instrument or timbre. Having a brass and a woodwind play is going to help separate tone. They don't really do that here. Schnittke just allows things to be cluttered. Um, There's also, of course, the half step dyads all over this place, creating that really tense harmony. There's probably also microtonal stuff. You heard there at the end, I had mentioned that some of the octave dyads, which is just basically two notes that are the same note but an octave apart. Could be more, but I think the only ones used here were exactly an octave apart. But also when Yuri plays the same note on two different strings, there's lots of tension there. The notes are never perfectly in tune with each other. Tension is just such a core part of the experience of this, and I don't like that kind of dissonance. It's fine as a flavor. It's like nails on a chalkboard. It sends shivers down my spine. You probably saw me make some pretty gnarly faces a couple of times in there. Once I understood that this was how the song operated, I just let it be. But I mean, even then, knowing what the song was, there were still a couple of chords that were just really disgusting. In I guess the best way, like I'm used to listening to metal, and if I say a chord's disgusting, then the fans are like, "Yeah, dude, you get it." But like maybe if you're a classical fan coming in here, you think I'm trashing Schnittke's chord progressions or something. But no, it does what it sets out to do. It is a very, how to use the word again, antagonistic song. I have a tough time getting through this. And a lot of it comes down to the way the notes are chosen, but there's also this antagonistic element of melody. I wouldn't say there's a lot of melody in this track overall. There's a lot of texture ideas, there's lots of atmosphere in here. We have a couple of snippets of melody, mostly coming from the violin, though we did have that cool call and response thing between the woodwinds and the viola. But we did have the call and response between the woodwinds and the viola that I thought was pretty cool. But for the most part, when we do have melody, it jumps all over the place. And this was what I was talking about when I brought up the concept of scale or even mode, because I feel like that sort of harmonic information gets obscured a bit at times as the melodies that the viola is playing are kind of obtuse. They jump around, making huge leaps across the chord. Um, And I'd say that there's probably even notes being pulled outside from the chord just to even obfuscate what the idea is to begin with. You know, if you're going to play five notes of your seven note scale, but you're also going to pull in two accidentals from outside of the scale, what even is the scale then? We don't have enough information, I think, to properly know it. This is one of the cases where I think sheet music would have been nice. I don't know that I would have been able to glean this type of information at a glance, sight reading it alongside the video, but definitely something that I would want on a second listen that I can analyze, pause the song, really look at what's going on, digest it, and then listen to it with the sheet music there, and really be able to pull that information in. But I mean, there are parts in here that almost feel like whole tone scales, which I mean, whole tone in itself feels very open. And I think when you begin to pull in some accidentals into it, it can almost feel directionless, homeless in a sense, like rootless maybe would be the word. The idea that there is no root tone to return to. It feels like no matter what, every note played is antagonistic. Every note is tension. There is no release from it. And part of that may just be never playing the root tone of a chord, but it could also just be that when we pull in these specific notes from other chords or other scales, that we lose a type of homeness to it. It no longer has an area to return to for stability. Knowing Schnittke, I wouldn't put it past him. The dude has a wonderful concept of harmonic theory and would absolutely know exactly how to do that, how to dance around a home note while still including it in the scale. But everything in here feels like wandering in the dark and getting lost and being terrified. at what you're finding as you're trying to, feel your way through the darkness. The textures of the walls or the things that you stumble over is just inhuman. In a lot of ways, as cliche as it is, I feel a nightmare is the closest analogy for me for this, including the alarm clock in the middle. To me, that's like being woken up from a nightmare, realizing that you still have, 30 minutes. You have an early alarm. You don't have to wake up yet. You have a second alarm, a backup for when you really need to get up, and you're still tired. You're just tossing and turning. So you go back to sleep and you go back into the nightmare. And that's what this song feels like to me. It's covered in fog and clouds. Details are lost in the static of it all. Even there at the end, it was just a slow descent into nothing, having pitches slide down into low ones. And while we're losing that pitch and it's sort of dripping off the walls, the violist is also getting quieter and quieter and quieter on the same drone. There's no more melody, there's no more harmony. All that tension is just bleeding away now. Not to resolution, not to stability, just to silence. And I'll tell you, even there at the end, while maybe I might have been hoping for a happy-ish ending to it all, I knew it wasn't going to happen. But the thing is that the nothingness that we turn to becomes a reprieve of the tension of the last half hour. And that might as well be its own release on its own. And that's sort of my interpretation of this song. Very loose interpretation, sure. I want to highlight a couple of other things I saw. First of all, is the sheer skill of Yuri Bashmet. Um, I have I think it's a half size, quarter size violin. I bought it for my kid when she was interested, and then she got uninterested, so I decided I'd pick it up. It is not easy, and I'm over here watching watching how he holds the bow and where he plays on the instrument, and I'm trying to like pick up through osmosis as much information as I can of how to properly play these instruments. And I actually learned a lot watching him play, but I have even more questions, as most of what I learned of don't do this if you want to play properly, he kind of bent. And I understand he's one of the best, maybe the best violist in the world. So maybe he can get away with non-traditional technique. But I did think that was rather interesting. Like one of the things I saw, what I was told is to never use your bow over the fretboard. You always have to stay over the body, but he went over the fret quite a bit. I also noticed that he would rotate the bow and play on the edge of the string too. That was interesting. Um, and there's little nuances like that I picked up. I'm kind of curious if anyone plays violins, violas, whatever, and you have insight into why he might have been doing some of these things. Maybe it changes tone or timbre. He needs specific things. Maybe it helped him to adjust pitch on the go, since you can't adjust the tuning knobs when you're playing a show like this. Maybe it allows him to control his pitch a little bit for when he needs a little bit more of that tension or something. I don't know, but if you do, I'm all ears. I am quite the novice at playing instruments like this, and I'll take any info. Um, Also, that double reeded clarinet body instrument. Let me know what that is. I don't know. It almost feels like it's in the oboe family, but its range is so much higher, and that made me think piccolo clarinet, but I don't know if that's a thing. In my brain, I was like, yeah, maybe. And then I said it out loud. I was like, I don't think I've ever uttered that phrase before. I don't know if that's a real thing. Um, what else was? Oh, they also used. I think they were the English horns. It's the trumpets that are played sideways with the flat buttons rather than the vertical valves. I'm noticing more and more of that in these, that the traditional, well, actually, I don't know if it's traditional. I guess so, the traditional trumpet with the valves aren't really used as often as the button ones are. They kind of share that similarity with the French horn. But yeah, you guys send me these videos, and I'm just not seeing my trumpet, the one I played for like 11, 15 years, something like that. I don't see that in these performances too often. And I wonder, now I have to go look it up, what the benefit is of using the English horn over the traditional trumpet. The conductor is absolutely bonkers. He conveys so much information. Here's the thing, right? With conductors, every one of them is unique. Certainly, you get out of music school and you majored in conducting or whatever. I don't know if that's something you majored in. I know you take classes for conducting. I don't think that would be something you major in, though. Anyways, you might have something a bit more rigid, a bit more standardized. The way that I conduct up here, especially when I'm counting time signatures out for you to give you a visualization, it's very standard. I don't really put a lot of my own flair into it. I'm not a conductor, I don't have to. But when you do it for so long, you're going to develop your own mannerisms. And this dude is so unique. Right from the start, I was like, this guy is interesting. But the cool thing about it was, despite never having seen him conduct before, I knew exactly what he was telling everyone to do. It's very clear, it's very concise, but it's very flourishy. And it's I love it. I love it. This is the type of conducting that I'm a huge fan of. I don't like rigid standard conducting. It's fine, it gets the job done. But something like this, where you put all these little micro movements into your hands, and the way that he uses all of his fingers in order to, give context to things, it is just he gives so much information in so little movement, and to me that showcases a ton of experience. I don't know what his name is. Maybe this was the first thing he ever conducted. Maybe my content of my comments about him having experience is totally off. But I would love to have this guy conduct me. He knows how to tell people stuff with his hands, and that's just that is a godsend. That is such a good conductor right there. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about in here? I don't think so. I think that's everything I saw, everything I heard. Like I mentioned, I would need another listen, maybe two. Sheet music would help a ton with this, and to really get what's going on. But I heard it. I understood the gist of it. I'm missing some of the details. And context would certainly help with that. So, these are my thoughts. Alfred Schnittke, Viola Concerto with Yuri Bashmet on solo. Let me know what you thought of this. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on. If you have your own thoughts, opinions, interpretation on this, and if you have any information for the questions I posed, please put all of that and anything else you can think of down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.